Welcome. During this interactive panel tonight, what we'll do is we'll cover the important topic of how to search for your first UX job effectively. And we have invited some awesome folks who have successfully found their first UX roles, who will share their insights from their journeys with you and answer your questions as well. We'll try to keep this as interactive as possible. We know that online events are often not as interactive as in-person events, so we'll definitely try to keep this as interactive as possible. That's why we ask you to write down all your questions, start posting those in Q&A, and we'll pause a couple of times as well to discuss those, and then we'll have a more formal Q&A at the end as well. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Michael. I'm a founder of a company called BeginX, a part-time UX career accelerator based on real mission-driven client projects that helps people who know UX basics transition into the field in one of the most efficient and affordable ways and without quitting their jobs. And I don't mean this to brag or anything like that, right? But just wanted to give you guys a bit of a background for credibility purposes. We have run many cohorts, probably by now helped over 120 people or so get hired into UX roles. And here are some companies that we hired, that the grads were hired by. So we've basically seen lots of people go through this entire UX career transition. So basically the new way, right? So starting with the end in mind, understand where exactly you need to get to be highly hireable by employers and how exactly you'll get there, right? So essentially what you want to do is you want to UX this whole career transition journey and think from the standpoint of an employer, okay? So you want to become a candidate who employers look at and think, this is definitely someone who can solve their specific problems and hit the ground running and bring value to our company. And they need validation and proof that you can actually do that, which they look for when recruiting and evaluating your application. Here's a quick overview of the key competencies you need to gain, and we'll explore all of these areas in more detail in the following slides. How did we actually come up with these competencies, right? So definitely not out of thin air. So here's what we did. Interviewed and analyzed hundreds of candidates, identified who had the most success in getting hired faster and why, and then interviewed around 30 employers or hiring managers and to understand what they're looking for. Analyzed job postings to identify typical employer requirements, and then ran over 50 events and many more by now with both candidates as well as employers, and interviewed them and gained insights on what works best. So essentially what we did is we used the UX process and did a ton of research to identify the key roadblocks people experience in this transition journey and gain insight on what is needed in order to design a better way to solve these problems and make this transition more effectively, right? So then we synthesized all of this research and identified the common themes. And again, one of the key takeaways is just starting with the end in mind and clearly understanding like what you need to achieve to really be attractive to employers, right? So you can actually get hired and not just learn a lot of stuff and then get stuck. So you know where you need to be, right? Based on those competencies, kind of that hireability checklist that we've shown. Now let's explore a simple framework for how you can actually get there, right? It's here's a high-level overview. First, you learn the essentials, the key principles and concepts, the UX process, main methods, deliverables, tools, etc. Right? So typically this is the most straightforward phase, the one that is probably easiest to do on your own, and where you can also save a lot of money, right? So if you just basically learn those basics on your own. We call this next major phase practice and grow, right? So this is probably the longest and practical phase, most practical phase where most of your real learning, skill, and experience building will actually take place. This phase is mostly about applying, practicing, learning things in more depth in the process, advancing your skills and building real experience. Next up, so next phase is about creating all the search assets, as we call them, right? So that's this essentially involves packaging and presenting all the skills and experience in an effective portfolio, resume, online presence like LinkedIn and other online various sites, basically, and platforms. Key phase, this is a key phase necessary to position yourself as an attractive candidate for your job search. And the final phase here is just search prep and execution, right? Which involves learning and mastering effective search strategies, the UX interviewing process prior to actually kicking off your search. Again, this, if you look at it, right, this seems very straightforward, very simple, right? But you'd be surprised how many people actually mix this whole roadmap up and then the steps, and kind of because they don't always do things in order that makes logical sense, right? You can sometimes get stuck in this process for like months or even years. So we found a lot of people like the product or service analogy. So the first two phases are actually quite similar to building a product, and we call them learn and build stage. The last two phases are very similar to marketing and selling of that product, right? So that is how we refer to this stage. Essentially, the first big mistake people make is they do not really build a great product that is attractive to employers, which means you do not develop your skills sufficiently, or you do not have any experience. And if the product is not great, it will be very hard, if not impossible, to market and sell it, even if you're a master marketer, right? And the other big mistake is after building a great product, some people do not devote much effort to really understand what marketing and sales is really about. They think that just by having the skills and experience is enough, and then it's just a matter of applying to tons of jobs, right? So meaning they do not really understand any of the science behind the marketing and sales, which means they do not really put in enough effort in order to position themselves as an attractive candidate, and do not learn what effective search strategies are and how to navigate the hiring process effectively. And if you do not do that, you can also, again, get stuck looking for jobs for a very, very long time, if you get there at all. Okay, and on this slide, you can basically see how all these different competencies that you need to gain map nicely in this transition journey. So you see when you can actually attain which competencies, like at what phase. This is essentially a high-level view of what you need to be a highly hireable candidate, and when you can attain that, right? Again, so this is at first glance seems very simple and common sense, but you would be surprised how many people do not really follow this, or spend like 2 years studying and thousands of dollars, and then still maybe have half of this matrix done. Okay. So here are some of the key points, and we're going to jump to the panel, to the fun part. Start with the end in mind. Understand where exactly you need to get to be highly hireable by potential employers, and how you'll actually get there. Ensure that you actually have a solid product before selling. Otherwise, you can waste months or years. Once you have that solid product, it is key to learn, practice, and apply the principles and best practices behind the marketing and selling in order to get hired faster. Okay? And do not confuse what phase you're in. So understand where you are and what may be blocking you at the moment, right? So from making progress, and focus on what is most important at that moment. Do not spread yourself too thin, because doing too much at one time is, will basically yield very little progress. Awesome. So now to the most fun part, actually interviewing folks who have recently or not so recently, successfully found their first UX jobs. Before we jump into this discussion, I would love for you guys to introduce yourself and just spend like 30 seconds, a minute or so, just telling the audience a little bit about yourself and your background.
In my case, I've been working primarily before I decided to transition to UX design. I was working as a data analyst for 5 years. And after that, I was working as a data visualization designer for a year. At that time, I already knew that I wanted to transition to the UX, and I've decided to make that final decision. And I went to design school to complete a certificate in UX. So that helped me get a pretty cohesive understanding of just basic understanding of UX UI. And completing that certificate, I had a chance to take an opportunity program with Beginnex, and they were very, very helpful for me because I was able to participate in more of a real world project with a real client, where we were able to help them design a dashboard for athletes' sports related data. So that was super helpful, and that helped me to improve my portfolio, improve my resume, and at the same time score a new job as a UX UI designer. And right now I'm working at Pandera System, which is a consulting company. It primarily focuses on tech, data management, and my role is a UX UI designer. In my case, it's all about working with the client, working on many different projects, different durations of each project, very challenging, but very fulfilling and satisfying.
I'll go. Hey everyone, my name is Mara. I guess my background's always been in design. I went to college for apparel design specifically, though I did find out about UX design senior year of college. But it wasn't so well known back then, and I was having a little trouble dipping my toes in the water because I wasn't quite sure whether it would be the right field for me. So I figured I'd do 5 years of apparel design, and if I'm still interested in UX design, I'll give it a shot. So 5 years kind of coincided with COVID, and then I came across Michael's BeginX program, and I thought it was perfect for my needs because I didn't need anyone teaching me the technical things. I just needed help building like a mentor to help me go through the process of building a project for companies, one with a real client. And we had an amazing client and had a great experience. And then I got my first gig shortly after we graduated from the cohort. I was at Strategic Financial Solutions first, which is a for-profit social impact company that helps the elderly refinance their loans. So super rewarding. And then I transferred to BNY Mellon, which is a custody bank. It's known as Warren Buffett's bank, and it basically just deals in investments. So we worked on dashboards and a lot of data visualization and data actually. But I quit that job last week because I got an offer for my dream job, which I interviewed for last September. And now I'm at S&P Global, and it's my second week. So really happy. I'm in fintech still, which is the industry I want to be in. I'm doing UX design, which I feel like I just have like a natural affinity for, so I'm really happy. And thank you, Michael.
Happy to help. Thanks for the kind words, Mara. And just to give audience some background, right? So even though these guys are our grads, right, we're gonna explore the journey regardless of whether you join BeginX or not join BeginX. You're just gonna get tons of value and tons of insights along this first job search journey. Thank you, Mara. So who's next?
I can go next. My name's Sarah. I am a UX designer at American Express, and I'm based in New York. A little bit about my background. I also have a background in apparel design, like Mara. I worked in the fashion industry for a couple of years, and I decided to pivot into UX design because I've always been interested in technology and research, and it just really seemed like a great fit for me. So yeah, I transitioned into UX. I was also in the BeginX program, and I shortly after started a role at Amex, and I have been there for about 8 months now. And I am on the enterprise design team, so I design for internal teams. So basically, my users are employees of American Express. So it's a really interesting field to be in from a UX perspective. I basically get to help people make their jobs easier every day. So it's very rewarding as well. And yeah, just as a side note, recently I sat on a hiring panel for an associate UX designer role at Amex. So I can bring my perspective as someone who was interviewing people, what I was looking for and what really impressed me about some candidates. So yeah, excited to be here today. Thanks.
That's really cool. Thank you, Sarah.
No problem.
Inigo.
Okay, hello to everyone. So my name is Inigo. I'm living and working in Dallas, Texas. Obviously, because of my accent, I'm not from Texas. I'm from Spain, but I'm living here for the last 7 years. And nowadays, I'm working in, as I said, as a bicultural UX researcher. So that means that I'm in charge, basically, of developing the plans for multicultural diversity inclusion of this company. And at the same time, I'm working basically in usability tests, projects plan, research, and so on. And my background can vary a lot. So I was working in like 6 different countries. So I was like social media strategist in Spain. I was researcher in Sweden, Italy, and England. So the last 7 years I was Spanish teacher here in the US. And now, as I said, I'm working in UX research. So I joined Beginex like more or less 1 year ago. I was in the spring cohort, I guess. I don't remember very well. So, and definitely it helped a lot to develop my curriculum, my portfolio, and to have like several cases for my curriculum. And that's all. I think I'm not forgetting anything. So I would like to pass the voice to Michael.
Thank you, Inigo. Thanks for joining, guys. Great to have you here. It's really excited to explore all the insights you've gotten along that journey, along all of your journeys and stories. So we'll mostly focus on the search phase, right, based on the topic of the event, right, of this career transition journey, and as well as the asset creation phase, right? So we may touch on like portfolio, resume, and like presence, and then how to actually execute the search, right? And basically, first you want to know how to package what you have done and position yourself to employers, and then how to execute, right? And we might also touch on that practice and grow phase as well. That's why we presented those slides in the beginning, so you guys kind of have a better understanding of the big picture of this whole transition. Okay, so before we jump into the details of actual job searching, how do you know if you're actually ready for that job and if it actually makes sense to start it?
I mean, I think that being ready could look different for each individual person. I feel like there's 2 aspects. One is having all of your deliverables and assets in order, like your resume, your LinkedIn, your portfolio, etc. And then the second piece is, are you confident enough and ready enough to apply to roles? So yeah, that could look different for each person. But I will say that even if you aren't feeling the most confident, don't let that hold you back, because I think imposter syndrome is real. And the only way that you'll get to practice interviews is to get out there and apply and actually do it. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I'm going to agree with what Sarah said. It's just exactly what I was wanted to say. Definitely the confidence level. If you have the confidence about your portfolio, about your resume, obviously you're not going to have like a extensive experience, but at least as long as you know that your portfolio and your resume is something that you are already confident about, especially the portfolio part, that is the most important thing, because the other thing is your skills as a UX designer. So for example, when it comes to design tools, if you feel confident enough to basically design some of the features, maybe some applications, basic stuff that as a UX UI designer should know, if you're confident enough about those type of things, including the design tools, how to utilize them when you're designing the application's user flows, then that means that you're on a concrete step towards actually you should start applying for the UX UI jobs.
Thanks, Alex. So unless anyone else has, so here's kind of to piggyback on that question and move forward a little bit, right? So to basically become an attractive candidate, right? So to make your job search effective, you need to first, again, prepare and package your work so you are actually an attractive candidate. What do you think is necessary to become that attractive candidate? Like what are the most important parts? Maybe like your top 1 or top 3.
I would say storytelling. Nowadays, everything is about the storytelling, especially in this field of design / research / visual communication / communication in general. So to have a nice storytelling, a realistic, a humble storytelling is probably, to me, it's probably the most important thing. Because the rest of the things, I mean, you can learn. If they give you the opportunity, you're going to learn the deliverables, these techniques. I mean, after a bootcamp or something like that, you're going to be more than ready for the technical part. Other thing, as Sarah and Alexandra said, is that you have to feel confident, and that thing depends on you and your emotion and your emotional status and so on. But to me, the most important thing is like that you have something to offer to the company. For example, it's like in my case, you are bilingual, or you pretend to be bilingual, or you are bicultural, or you were living in different countries. So start from that, because this is part of your history. And this thing can be very valuable for a company. For example, let's figure out that there is a company who wants to do tests, or a company that is designing a new web, and that web has to be like 3-4 different languages. Or it's going to be a web for Asia, or it's going to be a web for Africa, or it's going to be a web from South America. So start from that point. So your storytelling is extremely important in this field. And obviously the technical knowledge and the experience, and that's why you are joining a bootcamp, because you have to catch or to get or to grab that experience that maybe in other circumstances you are not going to have.
Yeah,
but don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
I totally agree. I can add on to that. One thing that makes a person a desirable candidate is being able to show their transferable skills. So if you are in this webinar, there's probably a good chance that you're pivoting into UX from another career. So say that you are currently a teacher right now. How can you take the skills that you use every day in the classroom and sort of translate those into UX skills and talk about how you've been doing that in your role? So that can give a hiring manager more confidence in you as a UX candidate. And the other thing is showing impact. So, even if you haven't worked in a UX role before, but you've done a project at another company that had some sort of measurable metrics, like you increased the company's revenue by 10% or something like that, just throwing that out there. If you've made any sort of impact in that way, definitely make sure to put that on your resume, because those things really stand out to hiring managers. And again, it'll give them confidence that you're a person who delivers results for the company, because that's the bottom line.
Thank you, Sarah. Alex, Mara, you want to add anything? If not, we'll move on to the next question.
Just quickly, communication skills are huge, like, oh my God. Because in my case, for example, I need to face the clients. I need to talk to them. I need to ask them the questions. I need to relate with them. And they need to know that I know what I'm talking about. Whenever we are starting the project, some of those projects may be very complex and complicated, but if they see that I'm asking the right type of questions, that means that I'm going the right direction, and they already can see that maybe we're good, that we've hired them for that particular project. So communication skills are very important in case, in our career as a UX UI designer. So I would add additional skill to that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's definitely crucial, right? Again, as we've learned over time, software skills sometimes can be even more important, right? Because a lot of people just kind of focus, and especially initially, on the hard skills and just, okay, I can do this, and they know the UX process. But if you miss those critical software skills that you can clearly demonstrate on your resume, demonstrate on your portfolio, and then talk about it in an interview and give examples and show that experience, right? That's basically crucial elements, right? If you go through like 100 job descriptions, UX job description, you'll see that it's basically everywhere. So talking about another aspect that is important, right? How can you actually build work experience that most employers are looking for? When most employers basically are already looking for candidates that have 2 or 3 years of that experience, right? And maybe 1 or 2. What are some of your thoughts and ideas? This can obviously include BeginX, but obviously it's not just limited to BeginX, right? Just in general, right? What are the different ways to do that?
Yeah, this is a great question. It's kind of like that catch-22. How do I get experience if I don't have experience? I was stuck in that mindset for a long time. there's a couple of things you can do. You can, if you're working at a company now that maybe has a UX department, you can start learning from them. Maybe reach out to UX designers there, maybe help out or shadow on a project. You can also do some volunteer work for family or friends. Maybe you know someone who owns a business and they need a new website. Volunteer or contract freelance work. Or you can do a program like a BeaconX, a career accelerator that will link you up with a startup so you can have a real world project.
Thanks, Sarah.
There's also AngelList. There's a ton of companies on AngelList that will just hire you off the bat without like really looking through your resume so thoroughly. So it's a bunch of startups on AngelList. I would definitely check it out. You could get some experience that way. But a lot of the time, I feel like companies put the years required more for their compliance or whatever. They don't necessarily need you to fill out every requirement on the job description. Most of the time, you only need 25% of it. I think the most important thing that you can bring to a company is the attitude and the genuine interest of learning and providing value and impact. So really fascinating. A month before I got hired at this job, another girl got hired also, and she actually came from law enforcement. So like police work. Can you imagine the shift? I was like, wow. And she was like, yeah, because I'm really good at listening to people and I'm really empathetic. And empathy is a huge part of UX. And I had never even thought about it. I was just like, police? On the street? And she was like, yeah, actual police work. And I was like, oh my God, that's insane. And here we are at the same level, doing the same thing. I have way more experience in design than she does, but she's obviously got a lot of experience from her experience to bring to the table, and she's got a lot of valuable opinion, and she made the cut. So yeah, I think it really doesn't matter what your prior career was. You just practice makes perfect, and Michael's great. Michael will always be there, super accessible. So yeah.
Thanks, Mara. Yeah, to just add to that, right? It's you can obviously volunteer, and by volunteer I mean not just volunteer for nonprofits. Right? You can volunteer and do pro bono work for any startup, for any organization. It's not always easy, right? Because you essentially need to find them, you need to convince them that they can kind of bet on you. Because honestly, a lot of companies, even if you offer them to do something pro bono, right, they may still not agree. Not because they don't want the work, but because there is the risk, right? Because they are not really sure if you have the skills, if they may need to invest a ton of time into training you as well, by actually having people who they pay lots of money to spend lots of time training you, potentially, right? And it's very hard for them to filter through that. But if you can convince them and kind of, through that stuff, then you can just volunteer and do pro bono work, right? And build some experience that way. And by the way, you don't have to quit your current job to do that, right? You can do that part-time, right? That's how we do it in the program too, and that's how you can do it on your own as well. It's just harder, right? And you could even find a team as well. Ideally, because team projects are best. This way you can talk about it in your resume, mention it on your resume, and mention it in your portfolio, talk about it in interviews, right? So that's, internships can be good too sometimes. But it can be a hit or miss. Some of them are very as hard to get as jobs, basically. So it results in the same catch-22. And for some of them, you might not really get to do work that is valuable for your future marketing of yourself to basically get a job, right? So because the work may not be, really related to UX, it may just be some stuff that you could do at any internship. But that said, you can. I'm definitely for a lot of volunteering. Because you can, because some people make a mistake of just not volunteering and just doing a few hypothetical projects and then just trying to do this like mass application process and then get tons of rejections and then they're not sure why they're stuck and waste months or years and all that time you could actually be building yourself up, right? We actually released a whole training on this whole transition topic, so we can share it with those who are interested later on as well. So moving on to the next question, right? So what are some of your guys' biggest mistakes and lessons related specifically to UX portfolios and case studies?
Okay, I thought of one. Related to case studies, so in the beginning, when I was going on my first UX interviews, I think the mistake that I made with my case studies was just talking about what I did and what happened on the project. So just going through the steps, like, okay, I empathized, defined, ideated, prototyped, and tests, and in that order. What I learned was hiring managers really want to see the messiness and they want to hear about what happened behind the scenes because they know that in the real world, no project is perfect from start to end. They know that sometimes there's disagreements between design and developers or design and PMs. They know that there are technical feasibility issues. So once I started incorporating some of the behind the scenes challenges and struggles that my team had during that case study project, that was when I started getting more of a positive response from interviews. So it really goes back to the storytelling. Every good story, if you think about it, has like highs and lows. I would say it's important to not just talk about what you did, but talk about how it happened and talk about why you did what you did. And like I said, I mean, really talk about those failures in the project. I mean, it shows a lot when you can talk about a time when the project went wrong and how you were able to course correct and how you were able to bring the project back on track. I think that like really speaks about what you're actually like as a being to work with on a project. So that's what I tried to do. It seemed to be successful for me, and that's something that I looked for in candidates that we were interviewing recently at Amex.
Thanks, Sarah.
One more thing that I would add to it, for example, in my case, I had an interview, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. It was with JP Morgan, and one mistake that I've done was the fact that I wasn't really 100% prepared when they were basically going over my portfolio and selected one of the projects. So I definitely learned that it's absolutely crucial is to be prepped with what exactly you know about the project that you've been working on, so you are ready with any types of questions that the potential interviewer is going to ask you, because it's huge. For example, from the UX UI standpoint, when they're going to ask you a very detailed question and maybe a more complicated question, you're ready to answer that question, because that's going to signify that you actually been part of that team and you actually been working on that project. So I would definitely add that one little thing to it.
Thanks, Alex. Any other mistakes? I know this is a huge topic, portfolio and case studies. I want to have at least maybe one other person briefly talk about any kind of major mistakes that you made related to your portfolio, related to your case studies. Anything else that comes to mind?
I don't know if this is super relevant, but I made the mistake of not writing out, I guess, my story before going on an interview. I'm usually pretty upbeat and I have a lot of energy, but there was like back-to-back interviews one day and I was just super tired by the time it was like 4 p.m. So like interview time came, and even though I had been talking about the same thing all day, I was like just so out of it. And it would have really helped if I had a script in front of me that I could like reference, since we're just doing everything over Zoom now. No one can see I'm looking at notes, and I could just like talk through it, And I was really frustrated afterwards because I was like, ugh, it didn't matter anyway, because it was like I was just using companies to practice for interviews, but I was just like annoyed that I hadn't thought of sticking my notes up on my screen. So yeah, that's 2 cents.
Thanks, Mara. Thanks, Mara.
Be humble, and an important part of the interview is that the people interviewing you, if you are in the last stages or maybe in the last part of the interviews and so on, and you're going to meet the team, it's like the team they want to know if they can work with you. So smile, be humble, and if you don't know something, just admit, I don't know, or I don't have any idea about that, or I will do it this way, but probably I'm wrong. So I think this is, again, a human factor, an emotional factor that is still important. So because at the end of the day, if the people interviewing you in the last stages of the interviews, maybe in the second round of interviews, on the third round of interviews, they are going to be the people you are going to work with. So they don't want to see you as a competitor. They don't want to see you as a bad person they are going to spend like 10 hours with. Like, for example, it's like in my case nowadays, like sometimes we spend 10 hours together in a small room. So as important as your technical knowledge is going to be your human factors. how laid back you are, how funny you are, if you are going to be easygoing. So that things are important. So
thank you, Inigo. Yeah, I think fit is a huge point. It's basically often a huge part of interviews. So as promised, I want to take a couple of questions from the audience. I see this like one burning question that 9 people upvoted. So we'll address that. That also touches on portfolio and case studies as well, right? So there are 2 parts. So D, thanks for asking that. For people who are self-taught and riddled with self-doubt, do you have any advice on how to determine whether you're even cut out for this field? And then the second part, any tips on what contents of a project are most important to include in your portfolio?
For me, the way that I gained confidence as a UX designer was by practicing and by doing. I think for a while, I fell into the trap of reading a lot of UX books and articles and just learning the theory, which is really important. But in hindsight, I wish I would have actually started doing earlier, because that was when I really started gaining confidence and seeing myself putting out these UX deliverables and saying, okay, I made that, like I can do this. So that helped me feel more prepared for the job hunt. And then it looks like the second part of the question is tips on content of what to include for a project. So for me, I adjusted parts of my portfolio for each particular role. So if a role was more UX research focused, I would include more of the research for that project. If a role was more UI focused, I would include more of the UI elements, like the design system, for example. And I basically had a slide deck and I just switched out and customized it based on the interviews that I was going on. So really each role is looking for something a little bit different, it seems like. So there might be some customization involved.
Thank you, Sarah. I think Alex, you wanted to answer as well, right?
So when it comes to the second part of the question, I think it's when you open the portfolio, when you have the project, the interviewer is going to click on one of the projects within your portfolio. Usually is the first one. They usually go over what exactly you've done within that project, and just like Sarah mentioned, depending on what exactly you're interested in, do you want to do more of a research or do you want to do more of a UI? But I think when you're also when the portfolio, within that project that you're going to focus on, you want to basically show as many visuals as possible just to give them a reference of what you've done. but also a bit of text, just make a brief description of what exactly that is, maybe some challenges that you face during that whole process of discovering what exactly those users need, or what sort of problems did they face. Just like Inigo mentioned, it's all about the storytelling at this point, especially when it comes to your projects and what you're going to display within that portfolio and within that project. It's your story, and you want to tell it in a way that is brief, quick, but to the point, but also have those visuals.
Great points. Lots of insights very quickly. Thanks, Alex. Anyone else wants to? I also wanted to add, while you guys are kind of thinking about this question maybe a little more, in terms of self-doubt, right? Obviously, the question of like whether you're cut out for UX, it's kind of a little bit out of scope of our topic for today, which is searching for jobs. But self-doubt is definitely huge, right? And this whole like imposter syndrome keeps coming up all the time. And I had a privilege of doing a joint workshop with Jared Spool once, and what he said about it is that there was a same question, right, about imposter syndrome, and he said that there are designers who have imposter syndrome, and there are designers who should have imposter syndrome. So there are two types of people. So basically, just know that whenever you're doing something new, you're pursuing a new endeavor, you're trying to reach new goal, new heights, you grow, you'll always face this imposter syndrome. You'll always have self-doubt, right? And the bigger the goals, the bigger your self-doubt will be, right? So that's so hopefully that answers that question. So here's another question from Ann Costello. How do I get companies to look at my resume and portfolio when a computer algorithm bounces me out when I honestly answer my years, which is less than one of experience? So I know I already have some thoughts on that, but I'll let you guys first jump in.
Okay, I'll jump in. This is where a real live person will be helpful for you. So I've been there. I've applied to jobs online, and it goes into the ether, and you never hear back. You're ghosted. I think just continuing to network, coming to events like this, meeting other UXers. There are so many great websites. One of them is called ADP List, where you can meet UX designers, product designers, etc., from different companies and sign up for mentorship sessions with them. So those can be opportunities for you to start building up your network, build real, genuine connections, and then you never know, if there's an opening at that person's company, they might recommend you. So really, that's one way to sort of surpass that algorithm when you're uploading your resume. Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. Good points. Anyway, so what I also wanted to just add to that is kind of similar to what Sarah mentioned, right? Is just a few keywords, right? Networking and relationship building, right? So that's what we want to focus on, right? So you can definitely do the whole like mass site application, job board, etc., but focus most of your efforts on actually building relationships. There is a great book that all these guys know about. I know Mara really like mastered it, called 2-Hour Job Search, that I always talk about. And just to clarify, by Steve Dalton, that's the name of the author. Really good. It's basically about networking and informational interviews. It's very short and to the point. It's not just a bunch of fluff, but it's actually a how-to system, right? 170 pages only, I think, around that. And very useful, right? So basically, I highly recommend that. It's not like that the whole job search is going to take you 2 hours. The initial, the initial setup of the system, of your job search system, right, and of your kind of who you're going to target, that's what's going to take you 2 hours, right? So definitely, check that book out. And we're not affiliated, at least not yet. We actually use that methodology a lot in the program as well, because that is like, we actually did a study. Out of everyone who got hired, right, all the successful candidates, and that's like 90%, 95% of people, 80% of them, pretty much, roughly 80% were either did that through connections, meaning networking and building relationships, or when recruiter reached out to them, right? Meaning that it's so important to build up your, again, online presence, your portfolio, resume, right? So you're actually that attractive candidates who recruiters get interested in, right? But that other part, recruiters, is much smaller. It's actual networking specifically. So cool. So moving on to next question, focus company types, right? So initially, do you feel it might be, at least based on your experience, better to focus on certain types of companies, like either tech startups maybe, or product companies, or services companies and agencies, or tech departments within bigger corporations? Did you have any specific strategy? Do you have any thoughts on that? Basically, what type of companies and industries to focus on initially when you're starting out your search?
I would check out Built-in because it's already organized for you. So I don't know how everyone else works, but I started out looking at fintech and healthcare companies. Both are really hot in the UX field right now. They pay good dollar. So just FYI. Built-in has a ton of lists for up-and-coming startups and companies that are already great to work at in those fields, as well as other fields. So if you want to work in like media, they have lists for that also. But I would say I would throw in 50. Okay, so like sort it out by company size first. Like what size company do you want to work in? Because that usually determines more or less the culture of the company, the pace. I initially started out wanting to work at startups that were in Series C funding and upwards, I believe. I believe that's the hypergrowth stage. So like at a certain point, Coinbase was like going through that phase, and I really, really wanted to work at Coinbase, but they have like really strict requirements for hiring UX designers. They actually really require you to have like the 4+ years of UX, like strictly professional UX experience or some nonsense like that. So I was really frustrated about that. So I forgot about cryptocurrency and focused on more traditional fintech companies like JP Morgan Chase and BNY Mellon and S&P Global. And then sort of just, I have like my LinkedIn connecting sprees where I literally go on LinkedIn, I type in the company, and I add as many people as I can from that company, like regardless of whether they're in design or not. And like through those connections, I add more people and then more people and then more people until I eventually get to someone that works in design, and then I bother them. This is thanks to that book that Michael recommends. And when I get my hands on someone, then I just like, I give them my storytelling stuff like Inigo was talking about. And then voila, you're in. But yeah, long story short, really have like a focus. So from fintech and healthcare, I narrowed it down to fintech. And then from company sizes, I narrowed it down to like 50 to 200 people. And it just works as a good jumping board because it helps you think through the process of like why you actually want to work for this company. And it helps your answers feel more genuine to the interviewer. And there's definitely more detail when you sort of write out your motives and your values and why they align to that company. So make sure you do that too, and make sure it's all aligned, because once all those things are aligned, you'll be able to streamline your company search down to like, I don't know, like the top 10 that you really want. And then you can really focus on like networking with people at that company via LinkedIn. Just get LinkedIn Premium for like 2 months. It's so worth it. And then you can just get rid of it afterwards, after you get a job. But like, just add a ton of people on LinkedIn, reach out to them, be super friendly. it really helps to have a smile on your face and a personality. All my jobs, actually, I didn't apply the traditional route, like through like an online application or whatever. I just spoke to someone, and then through that person, I was able to get my hands on another person, and then eventually I got hired. So the book that Michael's talking about is super really helpful. Highly recommend. Million thumbs up.
Thanks, Mara. Anyone
Yeah.
else has any thoughts on types of companies? Did you guys focus on specific types of companies in your search?
I do agree with Mora. I will say that start with your passions and your skills, your previous skills, number one. Number two, nowadays the top three are fintech, healthcare, and edtech. So they are massively hiring people. And then again, as Mara said, I don't know, make LinkedIn to be your Facebook. So instead of spending time on Facebook or Instagram, spend time networking in LinkedIn. Is what I say. So I do agree with Mara.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Start with your passions and your interests first, but also my tip is to keep an open mind because I came from a background in fashion, like I mentioned, and I thought I was going to end up working in UX for like a fashion company or for e-commerce, something like that. And financial services wasn't really on my radar in the beginning. And now I work for Amex and I absolutely love it. So keep an open mind to industries as well, because you never know what you might find. Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. Awesome. Okay, moving on to actual search methodologies, right? Or we actually refer to them as channels sometimes. Which ones are your favorite and why? I know we already touched on this a little bit, but which ones are your favorite and why? Like, to give you some examples, is it applying to company sites, job boards, recruiters, networking, informational interviews, friends, social networks, others? What are your thoughts on these different methodologies / channels?
I'm gonna say LinkedIn. I just reach out to people that are already, I don't know, like I reached out to directors and senior UX designers at companies that I was interested in, and I wanted to sort of pick their brain. So I'd have like informational interviews with them, and then I'd ask them their story, and I'd get them to talk more about their experience. And that just becomes like more insightful for me. Um, and then I also ask them if they have the time, whether they could look at my portfolio and provide their feedback. And they're usually really accommodating, like they love to help people. So having them look at my portfolio and then applying their feedback to my portfolio and then showing them that I applied their feedback to my portfolio is it like well, it shows, number one, that I value their feedback, and number two, that I can take feedback. And so it makes a good impression on them. And usually they're like, well, there's an opening on this team, let me refer you, or something like that. They're just like really nice. And I guess it's a really reciprocal relationship. Like if you listen, they listen, and like that whole back and forth thing. Yeah. I don't know if I really made my point clear, but I hope you get the gist of what I was saying.
I think the key point was LinkedIn and networking. To sum it up in 2 words. So, anyone else? Who else has some thoughts on like specific job search channels and methodologies?
Yeah, I can definitely add to that because LinkedIn is hands-on. I mean, this is like the channel that you want to utilize for job search. Not only you are able to search the job that are already listed on LinkedIn, but the other side is that the recruiters can reach out to you directly by checking your profile. So LinkedIn is best at it at this point. So definitely that channel.
Thank you, Alex. Sarah, what did you do?
Yeah, I applied to my job through LinkedIn. So definitely I was a heavy LinkedIn user. I also looked at jobs on Indeed.com. So those were the two big ones. Um, there's also, yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of people refer to it as like the hidden job market, where it's like maybe there's jobs that aren't posted, like Mara said. Maybe you'll meet someone and they'll have a job coming up on their team in a month that hasn't even been posted yet. Maybe you can have an in there. So definitely meeting and talking to people is important. Yeah, but there's so many jobs out there. I think Mara mentioned too, AngelList is one where there's a lot of startups that also post jobs there. I would definitely recommend signing up for that. I actually got reached out to on there once or twice. So definitely setting up an AngelList profile could be helpful.
Cool. Thank you, Sarah. All right, so let's jump in and take a couple of questions from the audience again. So Jamel Johnson is asking, are whiteboard challenges still a popular part of the UX process? What was your experience like with them? So just to answer that quickly first, yes, definitely they are. And based on our research and interviews, you would typically get them almost like 50% of the time, roughly. But I'll let others jump in. What was your experience?
I've never had to do one. But just be prepared in case they ask you to do one. Yeah. So, and you'll be fine. Just don't think that you have to figure out the entire problem on your own. Talk to the other people in the room. Workshop it with them, because that's what you're going to be doing when you eventually get hired at that company. You will never be expected to figure out a whole problem on your own. It's a team effort. So, and tons of times people throw all sorts of ideas. No one ever knows the full answer until after a couple of weeks or maybe even more. So the company I used to work at, BNY Mellon, they were researching this dashboard for 3 years. So like no wireframes. So like that's how long it took them. So I was shocked. I was like, 3 years? Like what? Your research probably so old already. So you probably have to start again. Like what? I'm so confused. But that's how they work. And it took, I'm not even kidding. I spent my entire time there doing login. And I mean, you know what login looks like, right? So but there were still a lot of questions on whether this is the best way to log in. Is there a more effective way to log in? Are we cutting out any other users? Just like a million questions, and I had never thought of them, and I was just like shocked, because I was like, this is login. Like I feel like everyone knows how to log in. This is like not something you really think about anymore, but it was a huge deal for them. Huge deal. I was like, oh my gosh, what? But yeah, so, and people always throw out the most insane answers sometime, like when you're workshopping with them, and you know what, it's all good. Like I feel like if you're good energy, that's the most important thing, and that you help other people grow and nurture within your team. Yeah, because you work with these people every day. It's no fun to be in a room with someone that's like stuck up and thinks they know all the answers. Sorry, was that too much, Michael? I'm gonna turn off my mic now.
I'll let you know next time. I know you can probably like extend the discussion. You can turn the story anyway. What about, so Alex, did you have to do a design challenges or whiteboarding challenges when you were going through the interviewing process?
So in my case, I didn't have to do it. I was kind of lucky, to be honest. Typical interview process for me, I had many interviews. Usually it was interview process looked like. A project manager, that was like the first interview, for example, that I had. Before even having the interview, you have the interview with the recruiter, very quick one. Then you have the interview first, for example, with the project manager. They're asking basic questions about your experience, about your portfolio. And then usually you have like the interview with the UX designer that you're probably going to be working closely. And then, for example, they can give you the exercise that it can work on the side. But in my case, I didn't have to work on any whiteboards during the interview process. It was kind of a straightforward, usually the interview process that I was attending. It wasn't too complicated, but it definitely requires you to be prepared for anything that they may ask. So I would definitely underline that one thing, be prepared.
Yeah, I also was very lucky. I didn't have to do any whiteboard challenges, despite going on many interviews. I was prepared for them though, and I'll just say that on YouTube there, if you just search whiteboard challenge, how to ace a whiteboard challenge, you'll find a lot of great videos that give you tips on how to do a whiteboard challenge, which is basically the most important thing is, like Mara said, you're going to want to not just take the problem and solve it quietly. You're going to want to talk to the other panelists on the call and bring them in and collaborate with them as if you were working at their company for the day. But yeah, definitely YouTube it. There's tons of examples out there.
Thank you, guys. So I want to take another very quick question from Karina Medina, and I'll just provide you some quick insights on that, right? Because we obviously want to take as many questions as possible. And by the way, when you guys ask questions, first of all, remember to please put them on Q&A. And second, please also try to indicate like who the question is for, like who you'd like to answer the question, right? So Karina is asking, what would be the best approach for someone who has experience doing some UX UI work in their previous role, a little under 2 years in a design role, and landed numerous interviews, but keep getting told I don't have enough experience, I'm a little too junior. So my quick tip on that would be to ensure you keep building yourself up, right? Don't have any time when you're not doing something, so you can actually put that stuff on resume, put that work that you're doing on the resume, right? So, but do you guys have any additional thoughts on that?
I think I would add to it that it would be valuable in this case to actually have a mentor, someone who's going to be very honest with you, to tell you that, for example, maybe there's something within the portfolio that is causing the problem. Maybe it's the resume, or maybe you're not answering the questions that they are asking you during the interview in a way that, you know, those are the answers that they are looking for. So I would definitely recommend maybe taking a mentorship of some sort, so that that person is going to tell you honestly that there is something that you need to correct or improve upon.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, I think, Alex. Yeah, it's basically that's a very common answer, right? As well, right? Sometimes it may be that you actually lack experience. Sometimes, like Alex said, maybe you basically didn't pass the interview process some way, right? They don't want to give you specifics. Unfortunately, not everyone will give you honest feedback all the time. So that's why it's crucial to do some mock interviews as well. You know, so mock interviews, get mentors, and just practice and nail it down. So basically you understand what is it that is blocking you, right? Critical review, like all the, you know, really do like a solid in-depth portfolio review with someone who is experienced, get feedback on all the case studies. Maybe there's something missing, right? Maybe you're not aware about something, and those companies, many companies, they won't even give you any feedback, right? You ask for feedback, they just don't respond sometimes, right? So basically you want to like really uncover and understand like what is the issue. And if the issue is truly experience, I would just keep building yourself up and keep ensuring that you have those solid case studies with solid experience in them. Okay. Cool. So next question. About methodologies, again, in a little bit more detail, right? So can you actually, so to piggyback of that question, like which, I know Mar already mentioned that was LinkedIn, was networking, right? In terms of the other speakers, which methodology actually got you most interviews, including your current role?
My current role? So I I guess we never really had a formal interview. I just like messaged them on LinkedIn and I was like, hey, I want to pick your brain about the culture, the environment, the leadership, um, the values at the company, and what your day to day looks like. And we got along. Um, and I talked to another person at the company, and we got along also. Little did I know that they both worked together. Um, and then they were like, "Are you interested?" So I was like, "Okay, I'm game." So there was no formal interview really. And then I just met the rest of the team, and yeah.
Mara, so just to clarify, the question is more, and I think based on what you mentioned before, right? So your main channel was LinkedIn, right? And networking, and basically 2-hour search methodology. And I also want to see like what do other speakers have to say about like which channels specifically did you guys, which methodologies worked for you? Is it just networking? Is it anything else? I know Sarah mentioned that she also was doing some online applications.
For me, it was a combination of things. I don't know exactly what was the most successful. It was a combination of applying to things online, um, mentorship, and just networking with people, and then also getting reached out to by recruiters. So, a crucial thing for me was making sure that my LinkedIn was fully filled in and updated so that recruiters could search for me and reach out to me. So I got a couple of interviews that way from recruiters just finding me on LinkedIn and having openings. So it really was just a combination of many different things. Like I said, the job that I got actually was just from me applying on LinkedIn. So, yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. Inigo, Alex.
The same. I do agree with Sarah and Mara. Yeah.
In my case, it was the recruiter reached out to me. That's how I got my current position. Just like Sarah mentioned, just fill out your LinkedIn profile so it's up to date and it has everything that you want to display to the potential recruiter or employer. So it's like, polished and you're really happy with it. Because through that profile that you have on your LinkedIn, you have so much better chance to for the recruiters to reach out to you and set you up for a potential interview, for sure.
Thanks, Alex. So it sounds like it's a mix, right? Basically, networking and relationship building is huge, but essentially augmenting that with some online searching, online application, especially LinkedIn, seems like a great strategy overall. What were some of your guys' biggest challenges on the way to your first UX job, right? And how did you actually overcome those?
So for me, I would say that the most challenging thing was not to give up, because I know that it took me a while to find the job, and obviously I had many interviews before I got my current position, and every interview was a learning process for me. So obviously after the interview, maybe you're going to receive an email that is going to tell you that, sorry, but we're not interested in you. We hired someone else, for example. Obviously that's going to like make you feel not so good, but I would definitely recommend not to think about it too much, not to take it very emotionally, but just move forward, improve based on what you've learned during that interview process that you had, and move forward, continue searching. Because in my case, like I said before, it was, challenge about not losing hope, just moving forward, even though it's going to take you a while. But trust me, it's going to happen to you. If you really, really want this, it's going to happen.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, that's very motivating and encouraging. And that's really true. I mean, based on our experience as well.
I think mine was more convincing. Like, I feel like it was more prepping my portfolio and getting it to a place where I felt comfortable showing it to someone. Because I would want to reach out to people, but it was like I don't really have anything to show them. So I feel like prepping portfolio after the cohort was done itself took me about like maybe a month and a half. And during that period, I didn't really talk to anyone. I just added a bunch of people, but I didn't like actively reach out to them or anything. So just like that waiting period is just a little frustrating because it's like you have work, you want to share it, but it's not 100% packaged. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Martin. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so let's also explore some of the. What was actually harder for you guys, getting interviews or getting offers?
Getting offer.
Yeah,
I had many interviews.
Yep, agreed. Based on numbers alone, I definitely had more interviews than offers. So that's like kind of the tough part, like kind of sealing the deal with that company. It's really competitive out there, so it's kind of like all the pieces need to align.
Awesome. So yeah, that's what Ann Potter here in the audience is asking about, right? So she's saying, I have sent more than 100 applications and I have never gone beyond the phone contact phase in the interview process. I'm in the process of redoing my portfolio and redesigning my resume. What else can I do to make my application stand out? What do you guys think? It's like a mini case study for you.
That the mini case is related to the position. So if you are applying for a fintech, so please, underline that case is related to fintech or banks or money or speculation. So say that, for example, it's a nice subject in the email. You can follow up after applying. You can follow up to the human resources department. Mara said that. Mara suggested that to 30 minutes ago, something like that. It's like, oh, I just applied, and you know why? Because one of my cases is exactly that. So it's like exactly as the description of the position that you are offering these days. So said that, and then I think you are going to stand up from the other people applying. Or for example, again, as Sarah said, you are a teacher. Again, it's like you are applying in EdTech. Okay, I'm applying in EdTech because I'm a teacher. And I was using your application or I was using your program and it's a disaster. Or obviously you are not going to say that. You're going to say it's awesome. But my point is, please connect with the position. Or Alexandra, if she's an expert on data analyze or something like that, and she's applying for fintech is totally normal because fintech implies to work with numbers. So, and again, follow up the application with an email to the human resources department or people from the company.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with all of that. I think another thing that can make you stand out is really thinking about what is unique about you as a person. Like, yep. Are you passionate about accessibility for the web? Are you passionate about research? Really, tell that story. I think one mistake that I made was I was trying to be everything for everyone. So I was trying to market myself to every company. Once I started honing in on what I was really passionate about, what I was interested in, I just felt like the roles that I was applying to became more aligned with who I was, and things just started falling into place a little bit more. So for me personally, I'm really interested in UX research. I love that part of the process. I love writing research briefs and interviewing people. So I just really embraced that and talked about that on interviews. And it turned out that the team that I'm on now really appreciated that and was looking for people who love research because I'm a UX designer, but there is no dedicated UX researcher on the team. So we do everything from research to design. So that was a really important skill. So yeah, I would say, don't be afraid to own your passions and what you love. I think that can definitely make a difference.
Thanks, Sarah. And I also wanted to kind of highlight something here, right? So, and you mentioned that you never got past the phone interview stage, right? So maybe the challenge here, your roadblock is not making your application stand out, right? Maybe the challenge is the actual phone interview. Maybe there's something happening during the phone interview that you're saying potentially that doesn't make them move you to the next stage, right? So basically, I think that would be the area, first of all, to focus on, right? And then just figure out what could be happening. Do a couple of, or maybe a few mock interviews with someone, get like a mentor or maybe another UX designer or someone, and just have them interview. Or like get a recruiter and pretend that you're doing this first phone interview. And just get some feedback. I'm sure you'll actually uncover some insights. That's actually key, because sometimes like people, they focus on the wrong problems, right? That's why we have this whole like journey map, right, of the transition, right? And because sometimes you think the issue is here, but then the real issue is somewhere else, right? And you're basically working on addressing the wrong problem, right? So it may be true that you're saying that you just need to make your application stand out more, but maybe it's not, right? So I would kind of try to do some mock interview and understand, like, basically just figure out like until what stage in that journey you're actually able to go through successfully, and then when things drop off, like zoom into that and understand, like figure out like what's potentially blocking you from moving further, right? Any other quick thoughts on that, guys? Because I know we have to. We'll have a few minutes, so we'll take a couple more questions and then a couple more questions from the audience. I know it's already getting late, and we'll have to be wrapping up after that. Any other quick thoughts on that particular situation?
I can add that, especially when it comes to the interview process, if they already ask you to have an interview with you, that means that they already saw your resume, they already saw your portfolio. That means that you already are good with that. Now the interview process requires you to actually show some enthusiasm for the UX, for UI. They basically want to see that you really want this job, and you definitely want to show them that you want this and how enthusiastic you are about the UX, UI. So I would just highlight that, especially during the interview process.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, here's something else I wanted to briefly ask you guys, and I know this is like a big question probably, but what were your biggest lesson during this whole interview process, the search process? If you basically were to start all over, what would you do differently and sooner? That's not an easy question, right? You basically have to evaluate your whole journey, but yeah, so just think about it. Pretend, like, send yourself back, quite a few months and think, like, what would you do differently? Is there anything that you would change, like that maybe someone in the audience can benefit from those insights?
I think in my case, I wouldn't change anything. I knew what I wanted. I was very focused on what exactly I need to do in order to make it happen. But it's all about, convincing that other side that I'm ready for it and I can do the job. I would say that the only thing that I needed to work on was on my confidence while I was being interviewed, because this is the part where you want to convince them that you are the right person for that position and they should hire you, not anyone else.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like looking back, I wouldn't change anything. I feel like everything sort of happened for a reason. I'll also say that it's really important to practice for interviews. in the beginning, I thought, oh, I should just, wing it, wing the interview, just be honest, right? But there's no shame and there's nothing wrong about, Googling most common UX interview questions and literally writing out your answers and reading them and really formulating what you're going to say, and then practicing it out loud with someone, whether it's maybe a classmate of yours in your UX project, or a mentor. That was one thing that we did a lot in the BeginX program, actually. We practice interviews with each other all the time. At that point, when I had finished the program, I felt really ready to interview because I had answered those questions and I knew them like the back of my hand. And that's kind of at the level that you need to be. You need to really just be prepared. And, it seems like, in my experience, most interviewers kind of ask similar questions. What's your design process, or how do you collaborate with others? There are similar themes that keep coming up. So be prepared to have like a situation for each of those themes and be able to talk about it. That's the big thing. No shame in practicing for interviews.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I think it's huge. I mean, practicing for interviews is like crucial. It's what everyone should do, and probably too few people do. And that's why we have that specific phase in the program. Like, you actually do that a lot, right? To do all that, because that's what makes you really good at it, right? So I also want to take a few more questions from the audience. So Nada is asking how to get an internship if you're not following the traditional route of going to the college and applying for internship during the last years of college. So we kind of touched on this before, right? So to answer this quickly, and I think Nada, you also posted another question below talking about what are your thoughts about volunteering, right? So we touched on that earlier, right? So definitely volunteering and some pro bono work can just be used instead of that, right? To just keep building yourself up and then volunteer, do some UX, or just make sure that that is actually beneficial for you, right? You're not just doing the work for the sake of doing the work, and then even if it's a great company, if it's like not not something useful for your portfolio, it's not going to be very effective. In terms of getting internship, I would just use general sites. I wouldn't get too fixated on an internship if you're not a college student, but if you really want to do it, you can just use all the different sites like AngelList, like Mara mentioned, or other ones, right? And there are many internship, Indeed, etc. There are many internship opportunities there. But in reality, based on like what we learned so far, you can do that, but don't just try to like focus too much on getting an internship, right? You can make yourself more marketable, you can build yourself up, you can volunteer, you can do pro bono work, just ensure it's useful. This is actually exactly what we do in the program. We just make you less junior and much more marketable. That's why most grads, they never get internships. They all usually even do not get junior roles. I mean, at least they're not formally called junior roles, because to be honest with you, there are not too many pure junior UX roles, right? So you have to build yourself up and make yourself more marketable. But anyway, I know I can also talk for quite a long time. Does anyone have any other insights on getting internships potentially, or and pro bono work if you're not a college student, if maybe you're doing this at a later point in life?
Yeah, internships are tough because they usually require you to be a full-time student, either in your undergrad or in grad school. I have seen a lot of companies, large companies recently starting apprenticeship programs. I believe Amazon started one, Google might, Facebook, Meta. Several of those really large tech companies have been launching apprenticeships over the last year or two. So definitely look into those if you are looking into entry-level work. But like Michael said, there's not a lot of entry-level positions out there. So you may also find yourself applying to mid-level positions as well.
Thank you, Sarah. So we have another question from Shane, which is related to what we talked about, but a little different, right? So it's a little different angle, right? So what advice do you have for figuring out what industry to work in, search for jobs in, right? Since a lot of UX skills can transfer across various industries, right? So basically, I'll just recap what we already touched on, and then you guys can maybe add as well, right? So it's often crucial to focus on essentially what background you already have, right? So let's say in Inigo's case, right, he was working as educator, right, and now he's doing UX related to education, right? So that can always be, and that will make you stand out from all the other potential candidates for that role, right, if you already have a little bit of that background, right? So we usually recommend that, just basically focus on those lower hanging fruits. Do you guys want to add anything?
I completely agree with that. In my case, I was working as a data analyst before, so I wanted to utilize all of my skills that I've acquired during that time and utilize it within the UX. And that's just exactly what happened. So in my case, for example, when I was working as a data analyst, and right now I'm working primarily with the data because I'm designing pretty much dashboards for many different companies for different industries. So all of those skills that I've acquired as an analyst is very much applicable to what I'm doing right now. I just needed to basically learn all the processes that are, within the UX are significant, whether it's going to be the research and what exactly you do within that research process, and how, when it comes to the designing low fidelity wireframes or maybe high fidelity wireframes, designing a prototype, you need those skills. You absolutely need those skills. You have to be really good at it. And then if you have those skills from your previous career and you know that you can utilize them, make sure that you're going to do it. And because that's going to just amplify you in front of that, potential employer.
Thank you, Alex. So we'll take another quick question, maybe two max. And they will have to wrap up after that. So Olga has a good question here. Are your jobs remote, hybrid, or in person? And how has the remote aspect of interviewing and starting out in the industry impacted you? So maybe you guys can talk to that a little bit in terms of your jobs are remote or in person now, and probably most importantly, how did that impact your interviewing process and what was it like? Was it all remote? And what was different maybe based on the fact, like maybe how would you advise people to prepare for it as well, based on the recent trends?
Because of remote, you can fit in up to like 7 interviews in a day. So I completely took advantage of it because like when you actually have to go into office, you have to put in buffer time for traveling and waiting in the lobby and being like I don't know, called into the office and then hanging up your coat and whatnot, and that just all eats into time. And it's harder to do when you're working a full-time job because you kind of sneak it around like your doctor's appointment or lunch breaks or like stepping out for coffee or whatever. So working from home makes life so much easier when it comes to interviewing other like companies. Yeah, so I would say it's a good thing.
So what about others? How was your
Yeah, I agree. So for my working situation right now, I am working from home. Although there is a plan in a few months to go back to the office on a hybrid basis. And yeah, interviewing from home, I really preferred it as well because you're doing it from the comfort of your own home, sitting at your own desk. You don't have to go into an office. You don't have to find the building or go up in the elevator and find where you're supposed to go. Going just into a Zoom meeting is so much easier. And I also found that it's just more comfortable. because you're not in person. There's still that screen, and everyone is so used to communicating virtually now that it's second nature to us at this point. So you can really get to know someone through a screen. And I've started my job recently over the last few months, and I've onboarded completely online, and it's been pretty seamless. So I think as a society, we are transitioning definitely to online very seamlessly. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Inigo.
In my case, it's hybrid, so it depends a bit on the project too, because some projects requires that the participants, sorry, not the users, the participants are coming to the office for live test. So we test like a kind of body language and other aspects. So they have to come, and we have labs. So in this agency we have labs, so they have to come. But I would say that nowadays the 80% of the time we can work at home. And even we can test from home too. I mean, doing interviews from home. That is what I like the more, by the way. But sometimes you can't, because it depends on the project, on the type of project.
Thank you, Inigo. Alex, how was your remote interviewing process? Did you actually, or was it in person?
No, it was actually remote. I would say all my UX interviews that I had were remote. So, but I'm also working remotely for my current position. But I need to travel probably within this year. I will have to travel a little bit, because as a consultant, you have to go to your client site to communicate with your client in person. But even before my company, before the COVID, they all were working remotely. So I think we're just gonna stick with it for a long time right now. I would say when it comes to remote interview, just like Sarah mentioned, I would definitely say it's way more comfortable and way more practical just to do it online in front of your screen. But obviously you just have to be, stay professional, even if you're on the screen and maybe they're not going to see you fully, but still maintaining that professionalism that you want to display to them. Yeah, so that's what I have to say about the remote.
Thank you, Alex. That's a great point. So I know I have tried to answer as many questions as possible. We're getting out of time already. So, and I want to hope you guys enjoyed the event. Let me also very quickly tell you about the program that we're running, since everyone was talking about it, and all these folks are our alumni, right? So this may be a great opportunity for some of you in the audience potentially. So basically what BeginX is, it's a part-time UX career accelerator program with real mission-driven client projects designed to help people transition into UX without quitting their jobs, right? So far we've ran 14 cohorts, helped more than 120 people transition into UX. Alumni have been hired by companies like SiriusXM, Coach, ABC News, Facebook, JP Morgan, Google, and many others, right? And including the grads that you guys had an opportunity to listen to today. So recently we have also been ranked by SwitchUp as basically the best UX bootcamp in their specific ranking in design. The advisors and mentors are also UX practitioners from companies like Google, IDEO, American Express, The Economist, and many others. Who the program is best fit for? The program is the best fit for people who know UX basics or are willing to learn those independently, or come from a design, research, creative, tech, or related background and look to transition into UX in one of the most effective, efficient, and affordable ways, essentially, and without quitting their jobs. All right, so we're also pretty selective, so we look for motivated and committed team players specifically. What you gain after completing the program is you build not just the hard skills, but the critical softer skills that we discussed. A real experience with a robust portfolio, expand your professional network, and actually get ready to land a UX job, right? And in fact, because the grads have done so well, we now offer this money-back guarantee. Basically, you land a UX job or you get your tuition back, plus an extra $200 on top of that. If it sounds like you may be a good candidate, You can learn more at beginnings.com. We'll paste the link and you guys have the name. So with that said, we run many different types of events. So we'll keep you updated about the upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter that is usually sent every few weeks or so. Thank you guys so much for joining. Thanks to the speakers. Really, it was great to have you guys here.
Thank you for
Thank you,
having us.
Michael.
Yeah.
Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.